Yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Let Loose podcast, the podcast dedicated to all things Gym Leader Challenge in the Pokemon TCG. I'm your host, Jeff Beisch, and today we are joined by Dragon Champion Lee Hoffman. Lee, what's up, man?
I'm good. I'm chilling.
Lee, tell us, man, how did you get into GLC? What's got you fixated on the dragons? What else you got going on?
So I actually learned about GLC from another YouTuber's named Stupid. Originally I was just playing standard, and I was getting tired of silver bullets coming in every set. I think the breaking point for me was like Palkia right after the Arceus, and just like another crazy archetype right after. And he had mentioned it to me one time when I went out there for a Saturday tournament, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll try it." Didn't really like. I liked it at first, but it wasn't something I felt like as passionate as I am now about. But he planted the seed, and that's where it started.
Nice. So, was your first deck dragon then? We got to know.
No, actually, it was. I think my very first one was water. I know the first deck that I put a lot of money into was the Kyogre Amazing Rare.
Mhm.
Um, that was like my first love where I was like, okay, this game is cool. Because I had always liked spreading damage, but I found that deck to be super crazy.
Yeah, I was like right on the end of Amazing Rare Kyogre. I think Amazing Rare Kyogre was like getting banned as I was like hopping in because I remember all the ban discussions about it and people complaining about it and the talk about like, well, bench barrier exists. Well, not every type had a bench barrier, so it's sad to see Amazing Rare Kyogre go as someone who loves spread, but that card is maybe a little oppressive.
The Melodic is just oof.
So good. It's weird that it really hasn't popped up in any build since that melodic, at least. But hey, there's always someone out there brewing with it, so I'm sure it will pop up in some way, shape, or another as we go forward. But today's episode, Lee, all about dragons and metal. And, these are two types that historically have been lacking a little bit. They haven't definitely been towards the bottom, but they're definitely never been at the top. I don't know.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on both of the decks right now?
Agreed. I tried to get my medal badge last week, lost my first game, and this is like with a pretty good list, updated list at that. A list that I felt pretty strong about. I thought it had everything, just come out a little bit slow. Dragon, I really didn't think that was going to be like very competitive. I really dove into it hard after you showed the Acerola and the Lux Cape. That's when I really dug into the archetype because I thought that denying the prize and saving the DDE was such a cool strategy. Maybe it's just because I run hot sometimes, but it seems pretty good. Like it's a viable strategy. It's won me some games.
And that's the thing, like, both of the decks are really strong, I'm thinking even back to when I started playing, they're, like, so much better now than they were then. I mean, Dragon hasn't gotten a lot in terms of support, but it's gonna be getting a ton coming up, but I remember Metal being, like, nigh unplayable, like, not having a very good draw engine, like, Jirachi was it, and then all of a sudden, like, a couple printings happened and Metal feels strong and metal feels like it's got some more diversity to it because before it was just one deck. So I'm hoping that there are good things to come for these types. I think the future looks good. Like if we're talking about the past not being so great, I think the future looks good for these types.
Oh, agreed. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's came out like just the past few sets, like you were mentioning. Both types have a lot to work with going forward.
Even right now, though, where it stands, I do think that Dragon and Metal might be the least diverse in terms of like how many functional decks you see people playing. Because when I think of Dragon, I really just think of one deck. And then when you get to Metal, it's hard to think of, two or three different Metal decks that are playing like a diverse lineup of different Pokemon. I think there's a lot of like, I don't know what's the word, like maybe compression in the playable Pokemon. Like the card pool for these two types is not large and it shows in the decks that people play.
Exactly. Yeah. People are excited about just like the draw engine and this the other stuff that you mentioned, the support kind of stuff. But yeah, the Pokemon themselves are lacking. So you see like big basic decks. In Metal's case, is more so like tank and heal and or light metal. Those are like the two that come to mind other than just traditional. Dragon, same thing, just like big basics, and then you got your fast caller and sonic slipping, and that's basically it. Like there's room for, depending how greedy you are, 6 to 8 cards maybe. But other than that, good lists are pretty vanilla.
Yeah, there's definitely a core of cards you're going to be playing. Let's hop into Dragon here. And Dragon, we have to talk one specific card, and that's double Dragon Energy. Dragon Pokemon have weird energy costs. They're all over the place. This card really helps balance things out. Basically, this card states that if it's attached to a Dragon Pokemon, it provides 2 energy, but of any type. So it's a pretty sweet card, and it's pretty useful. Double Dragon Energy, probably the heart and soul of the Dragon decks. Wouldn't you agree?
Hard agree, yes. Being able to fix all those weird costs with one card, and then accelerating cards like Raihan, Mela, even getting into the item acceleration, you can really make some stuff shake. Like we were mentioning, these big 3 energy basic attackers, you can just get swinging. Turn one attach pass, like that's kind of scary.
Yeah,
You never know if they're going to find it, and chances are, if they tutor the deck just enough, got a good shot.
people tend to think of Dragon as a donk deck of sorts, just because this double Dragon Energy, can attach to Drujigan or Drampa and hitting for some pretty decent damage off the back of a Guzman Hala. So Dragon's gotten that kind of, I don't know, reputation over the years. I think things are about to change though, especially with some new printings coming out in Twilight Masquerade.
Yeah, there's a lot to look forward to for sure.
Well, if Double Dragon Energy is the heart and soul, then we've got Dragonite and Gabite as kind of the engine. These are the legs that keep the body moving. Dragonite's fast call ability here is just basically search your deck for any support card and put it into your hand. So that on a stage 2 is pretty good. It's definitely a callback to the Gallade with the buddy catch ability too that we talked about earlier on the stream. Just having this as a consistency engine, super strong. And then the other Pokemon here, Gabite, just searches any dragon Pokemon and puts it into your hand. So you've got your supporter search to keep your deck going. You've got your Pokemon search to keep your deck, or at least to keep your bench full. Strong stuff from Dragon here. And then, I loved how Pokemon TCG does this, where they just print like fun, interesting cards, but they do it on the same Pokemon. So like I love these two Dragonites, which are alternatives to the other one, but like you're never not playing the other one. The other one is so good. Fast Call is just such a strong ability. But I love both these Dragonites, but they can't see play while that one exists. Jet Cruise gives your Pokemon no retreat, and then Energy Hurricane from the Dragonite here on screen lets you do 180, and then you get 3 basic energy and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you want. So, like, some pretty cool things.
Yeah, originally with the Dragostop list, Baba inspired me to you know grind out. That Dragonite was in there. The Jet Cruise,
Mhm.
all the pivots with the Reshiram and stuff were on my mind heavy, but I decided to just go all basics. Those are definitely some interesting considerations. Like you said, there's like that with a lot of cards. They get interesting on the good ones.
Yeah. Lucario is like another example of a card that has multiple good printings. We're going to talk about a metal card that has all the good printings too. Again, I think it's probably like you mentioned, targeted. Like these are popular Pokemon. Like Dragonite's the first dragon Pokemon. It better have good printing. So it's got some pretty sweet ones. Fast Call, just obviously the best one.
Agreed.
Well, you mentioned big basics earlier. We got Drampa and we got Drujigan. Drompa's pretty sweet. 2 energy. It's a water and a fighting. It does 70, but if any of your bench Pokemon have damage counters, it's 90. So it's the big donker, is what people tend to think of it. And then it can have some late game high power. And then Drujigan here with a revenge attack. Again, funky energy cost. Fire and water. Revenge is 40 plus 120. The basics are key in the deck.
The beet and potatoes right there. The double dragon compatible on both. Those are conditional attackers, but every game has instances for both. Easy to tutor around, easy to find.
Well, probably the card that people would be excited for there to be a better option is Reggie Drago in terms of drawing. I think that the attack power is great, but Drawing up to 4 and having to be in the active, there are better Pokemon in other types, but this is what Regidrago provides for Dragon is just that draw consistency when your hand is low. What are your thoughts on the Drago?
That is my favorite dragon Pokemon right there. That is the backbone of the deck uh, that I took to full grip games. It maybe not in it doesn't shine quite as well in a traditional dragon build where there's lots of supporters, lots of things that you're not your hand might be, 5, 6 cards. In the deck that I play though, Dragon Horde goes crazy. Then you're hand down and 1, 0 cards, fill it back up. When you play cards like Silene, like Mallow, like Cypher Maniac, effects like that you don't really think like draw till you have 4, like okay. But when you have like cards in the deck that support that kind of ability, you can make great use of it.
Yeah. It in your list, it's very good, and we'll talk about your list coming up. Been very underwhelmed with it, and on my other list, I get it's a necessary evil for a lot of decks just because you do need that consistent draw on board power. Going up to 4 and being in the active is tough, especially when the retreat cost is 3, you know? Fortunately enough, you're oftentimes going to have a float stone as a pivot, and this is where you're gonna attach it. But I'm going to be very excited when I can play other options. Again, I know we keep kind of talking about the spoilers, and we're going to do a whole spoiler episode for Twilight Masquerade coming up. But I'm going to be excited when some of these other cards drop, and I can kind of use them instead. Drago's probably still in those lists because it's just such a good attacker with its ability, but I really want something else to help me along too.
That's fair.
Yeah. Now, there's some other kind of, I don't say funky stage twos. These stage twos see a lot of play. The Garchomp is bonkers. When it evolves, Sonic Slip just lets you basically be immune from attacks. And then for water and fighting, it does 160. You do have to discard the top 2 cards of your deck, but small price to pay when you're taking a KO and then having immunity basically on the following turn. The Gudra, kind of funny. I like the Gudra a lot. Buster Tail is not a super powerful attack on a stage 2. It's water psychic and it does 120, but its slimy room ability reads as long as this Pokemon is in the active, whenever your opponent goes to attach an energy, they flip a coin. If it's tails, they discard it. And if it's heads, I think it's attached. So it's kind of funny. They also get to reattach if they have to discard the energy, so they effectively get another attachment. But Slimy Room can be pretty annoying, especially against like Rain Dance decks that have to attach from hand every single time. So I'm a big fan of the Gudra.
You hit it right there. The rain dance decks, it's super, super effective against. Also colorless, psychic. If they're flipping their double colorless, I mean, I know they have special charge, but that's still pretty good to that's a good sell to me. That's all it really took for me.
Yeah. I think I remember like I was either playing Gudra or playing against it, and I remember either being like 1 energy short after having to discard an energy. Like you only play X amount of energy. And the fact that like having to discard 1 into your discard pile, you get another chance to attach, but like having that energy in hand is in and of itself a cost too. So Slimy Room is definitely annoying. I don't have it up here, but the Goomy is actually really sweet too. There's a 40 HP Goomy that when it's in the active, it makes is it attack cost or retreat cost that are 1 more?
Attack cost, yes, that is my boy. Gumi, Hustle Belt compatible also. Yeah, it's just overall a super annoying card to play against. Because if your opponent goes second, like it's fine.
Mm.
You can just put the Gumi up there. They're not going to be, turbo energizing for 100 energy or, doing any of that crazy stuff. They're not going to be flare startering. They're not going to, it's better even outside of that too. Just maybe in the middle of the game or something, or just to slow them down, maybe make them use one extra resource to reach for it and then punish them. That's been one of my favorite cards.
I like it a lot. I've seen even lists just forego the Gudra and just play the Goomy so they could have an extra dragon Pokemon in the deck. So that's definitely a consideration too. There's not a lot of playable dragon Pokemon. And, to be honest, that's the end of our list. Dragon just doesn't have a lot because, again, you have to make sure your energy cost line up to a certain degree. So you have to play those Pokemon with those similar attacks cost. And then on top of that, you got to play the good ones. There are some ones that are interesting, but you got to make sure you're playing the good ones in your deck. And there's only like, I don't know, like right now, there's probably like 10 of them that probably merit some sort of play.
Agreed. Yeah, maybe not even. Like if we're talking basic dragons, probably closer to like 8 or 9, maybe. Yeah, definitely a reach.
Well, those are the important cards. Let's talk important decks. So, up on my screen is kind of like the quintessential dragon build, fast call coming to us from Tricky Jim. That's Andrew Mahone. Pretty stock list. I would say the stock dragon list if you're looking to play it. You've got your Garchomp line with that Gabite that we talked about that searches out Pokemon. You've got Dragonite with its fast call ability, the Reggie Drago, you've got Drampa, you've got Drujagon. That's it in terms of Pokemon. He's snuck in a Snorlax doll because he know he's going to be mulliganing a lot. And then in this list, he's trying to turbo out his stage twos with TM Evolution and then using TM Energize here as kind of like a backup plan or another way to get off a fast start. Mela snuck his way into this list. He's playing 2 Fire Energy. You've got a couple Pokemon with Fire Energy compatibility. Reggie Drago and Drujagon are the two that come to mind. So you can definitely use Mela in certain spots. Raihan is key, and then of course Double Dragon and a slew of special energy to kind of help you meet those tricky requirements when it comes to what Dragon has to offer. So fast call list. What are your thoughts on the traditional fast call list, Lee?
I'm a big fan of TM Evo. That's the first thing that sticks out to me. The three accelerants, 2 Fire with Mela and Raihan feels a little sketch, but I mean, it looks really good. That's definitely, like you said, the stock type of list. Like I was mentioning before, too, there's like, 6 to 8 cards usually in Dragon where you can, add a signature touch to it. But that's a very, very solid starting point right there. I see why he likes that.
The one thing that I always like maybe question, like maybe the only thing I question sometimes about Dragon List is like, why aren't you playing Lance? Like I'm looking at this list, there's no Lance. Lance seems
Oh,
so
no,
busty to
Lance?
me. Yeah, Lance is
Yeah,
just
Lance could be mellow for sure, but maybe he just values other things. Yeah, Lance does feel like a card that deserves to be in there.
I like Lance a lot, but obviously Mahone has decided that maybe like Stormy Mountain, which is the stadium that searches up dragons, or Mysterious
Exactly.
Treasure is another item that can get you a dragon Pokemon with all the other balls like Level Ball, Nest Ball, Ultra Ball, Quick Ball. Like maybe that's enough search in his deck. And when you get your Dragonite going, you're probably not going to be searching up for a Lance. You're probably going to be searching up for like Guzmas, Boss's Orders, or Hex Maniacs, something to affect the board immediately. So maybe he just found Lance to be kind of surplus to requirements for what he was trying to do.
That's very fair. Lance often is a dead supporter if you hit your good stuff early. If the goal is to hit the Guz Mahala and get that Stormy Mountain Turbo Energize or Evo TM kind of play off, maybe you don't want the Lance.
Guzmahal is really the lifeblood of Dragon since it can get you that double Dragon energy. So Mahone is playing, Trainer's Mail, Tag Call, Pokegear to kind of help him increase the odds of getting it on his first turn of the game. That's how important it is to the deck.
Yeah, that is the backbone. There will be help in the future though with that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, new kind of baby Guzmahala coming. We'll talk about it later. All right, another list. Again, Lee, I was looking for your list when I was thinking of this deck because even though you said that I might have given you some inspiration, I feel like you tweaked it and fixed it to your style and you performed really well with it. But it's
Yeah,
basically Sticky Dragons here. It's basically the same core that Fast Call is, but you sneak in that Gumi, Sliggoo, Gudra line, and then you're running a kind of, I thought it was maybe a little cute, but it's the luxurious cape acerola package where basically you attach DDE, you attach Lux Cape, you tank a hit, and then you use Acerola to bounce all that back to your hand along with your Pokemon. and then you can just reattach DDE to get in with another attack while providing your opponent an opportunity not to take a prize, and then of course getting to reuse DDE, which is just the best thing that you can do in Dragon.
Yeah, agreed. That's yeah, our lists are definitely different, but that was what inspired me for sure. I don't even remember Lost City being in there first, but that was a card that also grew on me a lot, especially for Dragon.
Mhm.
I think Dragon's one of the types that you can afford to play Lost City if you're tired of big basics
Yeah.
roaming around and you just want to get a threat out of there. You definitely have the speed. In this list specifically, Gudra's so good. I cut the Sligo personally, and I've been playing with Lapland personally for like 2 months, but I had to make some cuts. But just yeah, even if it's not a Gudra, like we were saying, it's really good. Gumi being able to just stall out, and Gudra being as proactive as it is once in the active, just not letting your opponent play the game and attack, and then if they flip tails, then they're not attacking either.
And this is definitely a more disruptive list. I don't think it's not the most disruptive Dragon list out there. And like you mentioned, Dragon has a lot of room to tech, which is one of the reasons why you see Lost City in this build. Snorlax was an issue. It's been an issue really for a while now, at least for Dragon. You get rid of your opponent's Snorlax with Lost City, and then you basically just win the game. So that's what it's there for. And of course, Fast Call Dragonite just lets you.
I might have to take another look at Giovanni's charisma too. That was another card that I thought was super good when the other Tatsugiri was revealed. The survival strategy one.
Mhm.
Like, oh, I'm gonna deny you the energy and then go search for any two cards. That proved to be like kind of mid, but charisma in other builds I could see being kind of good now. Like it's an interesting card.
It was just another way for Dragon to get another energy going early in case you found it. The issue always came, it was very conditional or situational. Like you had to make sure your opponent's active had an energy attached, and you had to make sure you had an energy in hand while you had Giovanni's charisma as well. So a lot had to come together. Fast Call made it easier, but it didn't make it perfect. And it just felt like a card that you just didn't have the luxury to play.
Right card, wrong time.
Well, this list is probably the most disruptive Dragon build. I wouldn't say it's a control build by any mean, but this is one of Weeder's Dragon creations, and I really, really love this list. I haven't found a way to quite make it work for me. Weeder and I have different brains when it comes to how we attack the battlefield and those sorts of things, but it's still a sweet list. So again, you'll notice a lot of the same characters, but his flex mons here are he's playing Noibat and Noivern. And Noivern has the Boom Burst attack, which does, I think, 10 damage counters to everything for just one attachment. When I say everything, I mean all of your opponent's Pokemon. So you're spreading damage with Noivern. It's got free retreat as a stage one. It's a pretty reasonable pivot, so it's got things going on. And then Salamence here has some pretty interesting things going on. Its intimidating roar is an escape rope for your opponent, where you make them switch. And then for 2 energy, it just does like big damage as long as your opponent's Pokemon have damage counters, which you again get from the synergy from Noivern. So it's a fun list. Have you tried this one, Lee?
I have not, but yeah, that definitely looks interesting. The Noivern with two damage counters to everything, along with the built-in escape rope. I could see why. I could see. I see the vision there. That seems pretty cool.
And we just made a couple changes to it since I played. Like he used to play Delinquent. He was more in on some more control cards. But he's gone, it looks like, with the Acerola Lux Cape package. I think most people think that that's a pretty good thing in Dragon since DDE is such a powerful resource. No Mela here again, even though I think he's playing 2 fire energy, which we saw that from Mahone's list. Weeder has obviously decided that it's not maybe the worth it in his build. But, he's got teammates instead, which is also a powerful card and something you could choose to play if you'd like. Well, Lee, your list, Turbo Dragon. Talk us through it.
I know what you're thinking. There's 5 Pokemon there. You're crazy. It's not going to work. It's a pile. You're right most of the time. But when it works, this deck is probably the most fun I've ever had just playing the game. There's so many impactful coin flips and little like actions during your turn, you can see so many cards and you can accelerate a lot of energy really quick. You can pinpoint your cards with Mallow and Cypher Maniac. You got Turbo Energize and Wishful Baton to start hot and then chain attackers, bounce the energy around. You have a lot of high roll stuff in here like the Ether, but that Ether, you reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a basic energy card, you can attach it to any of your Pokemon. So stuff like that and Turbo Patch, Energy Sticker, you got Mellow Rhyhorn, like I said, the Turbo Energize. There is a lot going on in here. And the Regidrago really is the backbone to the deck. Him and the Reshiram being able to accelerate the fire energy and still attach for turn. You create a lot of scenarios where your board state is just too much for them to deal with early, and then you played like half of your deck, the first couple turns if things go right, and then you're just digging for gust. You can recur lots of your cards with Silene, recycle, just a lot of super cool coin flip effects. So regardless of how competitive I thought it was about to be, like it's been, like I said, the most fun deck that I'm very passionate about. We cooked this up in Dragon Gym, and Baba showed me, the shell for it. We were just theory crafting, but he gave me the shell, and I put my signature touches and made some decisions on here. And this is essentially like what I think of when it comes to like a turbo deck. Like this is a lot of cards to be playing. Lots of items, lots of coin flips, lots of fun.
Yeah, and this is the one that you won your dragon badge with at Full Grip Games, so shout out to you for that. And we ended up playing it on stream, I think last week. So I've got that video coming out, so you'll be able to see Lee in action. There was a pretty sweet game where we had a lot of back and forth. Unfortunately, I think you ran out of cards in your deck just because you had so many
I did.
actions going on. It was a sweet game though, but yeah, this deck has a lot of potential. And again, it's a gambler's deck. I remember like watching you flip like 15 coins that game. But it was a
Yeah,
lot of fun to play against, and it definitely hits for big numbers and fun numbers and does some fun things. It's good if you want to try a fun dragon deck. This is it. Well, some other builds, because again, Dragon limited in what it has access to, but if you're looking to play, some other builds that you might consider are Ultra Necrozma is a card. I think for 2 energy it does like 170, but you can only attack with it if your opponent had like two or fewer prizes, or if you have two or fewer prizes. So you have to use like Silent Lab to really get a lot out of it. And then there's a really cool welder dragon build going around, and that's from Subject. He, put together a list. He played it in the spring championship. We talked about it in last week's episode with Weeder. It's a really cool deck. You're using fire energy as kind of like the main backbone of it. You got a couple of different Pokemon that can attach here and there. It's a very interesting and unique way to go about playing dragon. So those are two builds. And I'm going to encourage you, if you don't like the other two or the other three that we showed on screen, and you're looking for something a little spicy, try some of these cards out. They'll be a lot of fun. Well, Lee, where does dragon stand right now in the meta?
I think it's like lower A tier. It depends. It really depends the specific list that you're playing and how you're piloting it. I think that the aggressive versions are very good. When they pop off, they're hard to keep up with. I think it gets much better very soon, though. But if we're just talking right now, high B plus, low A minus, I think somewhere in there.
And I'm a little bit off from where you're at. I know you're saying like A, B plus tier, but if I had to put Dragon somewhere, at least for my personal experience, I'm kind of like in the middle with it. I feel like it doesn't have a lot of bad matchups, but it's also in that spot where it doesn't have a lot of good or easy matchups. So like you're playing against someone, it always feels 50-50. And since a lot of your attackers are conditional, you have to have something KO'd for revenge to be good from Druddigon. Drampa has to have, damage counters on your bench. Because a lot of your heavy hitters are conditional, I just feel like a lot of decks have the upper hand. Like, Snorlax is just 3 energy 180. Like how do you compare to that when you're playing Cards and Dragons sometimes. And so I'm gonna put it in the middle. Like I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's good. I think it's right here. If you're skilled, you're gonna get wins. If you're not skilled, you're gonna have some tough matchups. But at the end of the day, Dragon can also just donk people on turn one pretty effectively. So you're always gonna find yourself in any game, regardless of what your opponent's playing. Hey, let's talk deck of the week. I don't know if you've even seen this list yet, Lee. This is coming to us from Acco Blubber, which who I know lovingly is Roger. Shout out to Roger. But this
My
is a Turbo Executor list. And I saw this list. I actually ended up playing against it in just like a casual friendly match, and then found out like a week later that it was Roger's baby. And I was like, oh, it makes total sense now. Basically, you've got three attackers that you're kind of trying to navigate and use in different situations. You've got a Lowland Executor, which is pretty sweet. One energy, you do 20, plus you do 20 more for each different type of basic energy type in your discard pile up to 100. So you cap at 120, but it's just one energy, and the deck has ways to get that energy into the discard pile. Jump Pluff with the Fluffy Barrage, which allows it to attack twice, does 60 damage twice for one energy. It is a stage 2, but it feels like a stage 1 because it has Skip Bloom here, which lets it evolve immediately if you've attached an energy to it. So, again, another Pokemon that does 120 damage. And then you have the Lokix here, or Lokix. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but if you evolved it, its assaulting kick attack does 30 plus more damage the turn that you evolved it. So very situational, but this deck just has different ways to recover it, like Revitalizer. You can scoop up and do it again if you need to, or you can just play good old Clara to get it and energy back to do it all again. So that's the only three attackers that the deck plays is that. Then you've got Lurantis here to boost damage by 20. And you've got good old Roserade that when it evolves just goes and gets you any card from the deck. And then one of my new favorite cards, a card I actually didn't know existed until this, is this Shuckle. This Shuckle is kind of funny. So this Shuckle, when you play it onto the bench, you can search your deck for 3 basic energy cards and put them into the discard pile. So it helps you get to that Alolan Executor's attack just by being benched. And then it's Turbo Energize on a stick from your discard pile. So its attack is just 1 energy attached to energy from your discard to your Pokemon. And it's pretty cool. So it's got a lot of cool things going for it. When we were talking through the deck, the biggest issue that it seems to have is damage output. It's playing Muscle Band. Roger even thought that it needed Vitality Band, which only does 10 more damage, because 120 just isn't good enough into a lot of matchups. So he's still trying to figure the little bit out that he needs to hit. The 150s, the 160s. I said Kukui. I'm always going to say Kukui. Play Professor's Kukui to get your damage buffs plus draw cards. But this is the deck. It's super sick. It's one of the few decks where you can play Fairy Energy effectively. So if you're a Fairy friend, try this deck out.
That's a pretty cool deck. Scoop Up Not to Abuse the Execute and Roserade and stuff. Is there Lurantis in there?
Yep. The Lurantis.
Okay. Vitality Band even with the Muscle Band. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like the concept.
Yeah. And one of the cool things about, you mentioned the Execute. It's one of the hardest Pokemon for me to say, execute and spell. Execute. The Execute here only has 30 HP, but if it's in your discard pile, you can just plop it on your bench. So it just like keeps coming back. So it's a fun card. It only has 30 HP, and when I was playing against the deck, I was playing Rapid Strike Starmie. So it basically just read, give me a free prize. Unfortunately, in that matchup, 30 HP Pokemon, not super excited to see Rapid Strike Starmie. All right, Lee, Metal time. You a Metal fan? Have you played a lot of Metal?
I wouldn't want to say a lot, but I've played a little bit. Yeah, more recently than in past times,
Mhm.
for sure.
Metal was, I think, my third deck. For me, it was like Grass and Dark were my first two, and I honestly can't remember which deck I had first. And then I had a lot of love for Steel type because Gen 2 is like probably one of my favorite games, like Gold and Silver, top notch Pokemon content for me. So Steelix and Sizor were two of my favorites, and of course they're unplayable in GLC because you don't have a steel Onyx and you don't have a steel Scyther. So that's a real bummer for all you steel type lovers out there. If you can't play your Gen 2, the OG metal Pokemon are unplayable.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. At first, my heart was broke when in the original games you had to have a friend to trade that Caesar and Steelix, and now my heart is broke because I can't play this Pokemon in GLC either. Got hit with two stones.
Well, you know what? If this was back then, I would definitely be trading you. We'd be getting our metal Pokemon on. Let's talk the metal Pokemon. Again, not super diverse in terms of the Pokemon you're going to see. A lot of the decks are going to feel homogenized. It's just not a lot to pick from that's top quality. Back in the day, decks were playing Kling Clang as the main energy acceleration source. And basically, all of these cards, these other ways to accelerate energy, have kind of popped up in recent builds because Kling Clang used to be the only thing that was good. And for those of you who don't know what Kling Clang does, when you evolve it, you search your deck for 3 basic energy and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you want. And it also had a reasonable attack. Like it did like 160 for 3. So it was a pretty decent rate, but that was the only way to really get fast starts in metal. Well, things have kind of changed a bit. And we have these 3 ways, which are the new ways to accelerate energy in metal. I mean, Metal Link's Bronzon has been around forever. It saw play in those Kling Clang builds as well. But Metal Links just says it's a Dynamotor. Attach an energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon, and it's got to be a metal energy. It's pretty sweet because you get to play Evolutionary Advantage Bronzor, so you can evolve it turn 1 going second, which lets you get some fast starts that way as well. The other one, I'm going to jump all the way to the other card on the other side of the screen here, is Magnezone, whose magnetic circuit is basically just a rain dance effect. And this really only came into existence when a powerful draw engine got printed. So Magnezone and what decks became known as Metal Zone popped up, and they were pretty powerful for a bit. Then our new boy, Metang, got printed, and Metal Maker is a huge boost. Look at the top 4, and then you attach any number of basic metal energy. And to be honest, I've seen this card whiff quite a bit, but even when it's whiffed, it's found at the next turn or the turn after. Like it's still probably netting you about 1 attachment per turn. And if it's not doing that, it's putting cards on the bottom of your deck that you probably aren't looking for anyway. So this Metang is definitely worth it, I think, in almost every single metal build at this point.
Yeah, I think it gets strong with more ways to tutor the deck, like I was kind of talking. You can play cards like Mallow, Cypher Maniacs, put those 2 metal energies right on the top. You could play cards like Switching Cups, put an energy from your hand to the top. Other cards synergize with like Metagross. Metagross, you can stack the deck too. There's definitely builds to be explored that are good and interesting.
Yeah, 100%. And this Metang, I think Metal Maker Metang is going to maybe change the game for Metal and make it, I don't know, maybe not the same way that Snorlax is, but it definitely is going to rely on its basic attackers in the same way that Snorlax and colorless builds have because they're just so easy to recur. And now you have pretty easy ways to power them up that take little to no effort. I mean, if you're playing Bronzon and Metang in your deck, that's 2 stage 1s that could both find you an energy for turn. And then as long as you have an energy from hand, you're powering up most things in metal that hit hard. Well, the engine, all right, pun intended because we have Reverum on screen. Reverum is the big card that I think made metal going from like bottom of the barrel, dirtling down below with fighting and fire where they're at, to all of a sudden being like a pretty reasonable deck to play that you could play competitively and win games with. Like kudos to Reverum. So Reverum is you have to discard an energy card from your hand and you draw up to 6. So not that big of a problem as long as you're playing enough metal energies or ways to recover metal energies to hand in your deck. The other 2 cards that really help you with your consistency are the Jirachis. And we talked about how Pokemon TCG loves to print the same name cards with busted abilities. So Stellar Wish, I think, is the better option. It's basically look at the top 5 cards, put a trainer into your hand, and then you put it to sleep. but you mitigate it going to sleep by playing cards like a skateboard, which let you retreat if it's asleep. So the going to sleep part, not that big of a deal. And then the other Jirachi here with Dreamy Revelation is you get to look at the top two cards. You get to put one on your hand and one card on top of your deck. So it's pretty cool too, and it probably synergizes pretty well with Matang too because you can always leave the energy if you need to. So some pretty interesting choices here in terms of draw power and consistency pieces in metal. All right, the attackers: Zamazenta, Dialga, and Heatran. I think these are the three best attackers. Maybe best isn't the right word. I think these are probably the three heaviest hitters that are pretty easy to recover in metal. So Zamazenta, the best one, 3 energy. Retaliate does 100 plus 120 more if a Pokemon was KO'd. And then if any energy is attached to it, it takes 30 less damage. So effectively, a basic with 160 that can do upwards of 220, just pretty good, pretty pretty good
Really
if I
good.
have to say. Dialga here is a card that you don't mind seeing early and that you don't mind seeing late. The temporal backflow is 1 energy. Put a card from your discard pile into your hand. You play Nest Ball, you get another basic. You Dialga, get Nest Ball back. You can do it again to help you get set up. You can play Ball Guy twice. Not that that's super effective, but you get where I'm at. You can play your busted setup supporters twice. You can play Boss twice. And then Metal Blast is a pretty good attack too. It's a Hydro Pump attack. So 60 plus 20 more for each metal energy attached to it, cost being 3 colorless. Heatran is probably a pretty interesting card as well. It really saw its best play in the Kling Clan days, but Iron Hammer is its attack here, 2 metal and a colorless. If it has any fire, it does 160, and then it's just a basic with 140 HP. It's pretty strong. And the fire, you know, cost there is not that steep because some lists have been playing Mela, some lists are playing Turbo Energize, so you're going to have access to a fire energy. Rainbow is another card I think sees play. Rainbow or Aurora, I think, are maybe the two special energies that see play that give them that fire energy cost. So Heatran, just another big basic.
Zacian is good too. There's a couple decent Zacians. I
I've heard
wouldn't
it.
call them like great, but there's a couple that are playable. But yeah, that's not a lot for metal.
Yeah, not a lot. And then you mentioned this way earlier, like maybe at the beginning of the podcast. Metal really tends to lean into tank and heal strategies just because of the nature of steel and metal. So Copper Raja here is a stage 1 with 190 HP. For reference, Torterra, who's a big stage 2 in grass, also has 190 HP. And then for 3 energy, it's all got to be metal. Muscular Nose does 220. The downside is if it has 8 damage counters on it, you can't actually use that attack. So you'll see people kind of target the Caparaja, maybe hit it with kind of like a dinky attack, get those 8 damage counters on it to kind of navigate and give themselves another turn. So there's some downside to playing this Caparaja, but again, a lot of upside too. Then you'll see Aegislash here too. Um, Not as popular as it used to be. It is a stage 2, but it does reduce damage by 30 to all of your Pokemon. So it's pretty cool in some tanky builds. Stage 2 is probably its biggest downside.
Yeah, that was my first metal deck with the bronze song that can move the energy around, and then
Mm.
you max potion, Cheryl, all that kind of stuff. It's probably better now with stuff like the Full Metal Lab and Pot Helmet and all these other kind of little yeah those.
Yeah, perfect segue. And leading more into this kind of tank and heal strategy, Metal has some pretty busted like tools and then a pretty good energy in the form of shield energy. So shield energy not only provides metal, but it also reduces damage by 10. And then you've got metal goggles, which is just basically a pot helmet for your metal Pokemon. And then abilities and attacks can't put damage counters on things. So you're pretty well insulated from like Lost Zone decks with this metal goggles on. And then metal frying pan here, same thing, 30 less damage. And then you also get rid of weakness. So if you're finding fire to be a hard matchup, just Heck in Metal Frying Pan, although most lists are probably already playing it anyway. Then all of a sudden, your Pokemon that this is attached to has no weakness. It's at the point where like Metal just has so many tools that there's like Luckscape gives up 2 prizes. No, thank you.
Nah.
All right, let's talk some decks. This deck is probably one of my favorite decks that I've seen recently. This is coming to us from Andre Costella. This is the list that I coined the Zombie Zenta because no matter what I did playing against it, he just was able to recover Zamazenta like 3 times throughout our match and just retaliate, retaliate, retaliate. He took like 3 or 4 knockouts with the Zamazenta. It was pretty busted. And this is a list that's playing the Bronzong with the Metal Links. It's playing Matang to accelerate energy. It's got Elixir, I think, in it. Let me double check before I say that for sure. Looks like maybe he's changed the list since then. But, he's got the Jirachi we talked about, Heatran, Dialga, Zamazenta. He's just playing like these big basics, ways to accelerate energy, and then just good cards and metal to keep them coming back. Metal Zone. We got Metal Zone here from B. Savasco. This is the list that I mentioned that was playing the Magnezone there. Big card in these decks is the Mount Coronet here, which gets 2 metal energy back to hand so that you can use Reverum over and over again without too much of a downside. This list is playing cards like Sonia to make sure you get that energy into hand, along with Letter and Earthen Vessel. Just important to have that energy in your hand and coming back. He's also playing kind of like similar to you. He's playing Penny here as a way to get his basics back into hand. So he's not giving up prizes. He's got like Cape of Toughness and Fighting Fury Belt in here as well that hopefully he can reuse and spread around to his other basics. All right. Another list here from Sir Marcus. He's a big Paparaja lover. So I had to show some tank and hill strategies here. And this is one that's in line with that. You'll see in a couple of these tank and hill strategies, people playing Tropical Beach just because you have the time to kind of shuffle and draw with Tropical Beach, even though it earns your turn. Just because Cropperage is so big, absorbing damage. You're playing the Celesteela, which is a pretty interesting card. Its attack can be used for 1 energy on certain conditions. And then you've got the Melmetal here, which like it uses its Ingot Swing and it can't be damaged by Pokemon with abilities. And then it also just has an attack that hits for 150 if you can get it up to 4 energy. So some pretty interesting things here. It's got Full Metal Lably, like you mentioned, Crystal Cave to heal, and Metal Core Barrier, which is a card I haven't seen in a long time. Basically, you attach it to a Pokemon, it takes 70 less damage the following turn, and then it falls off. So another interesting take on Metal here. Other builds you might see, Turbo Metal builds, got to use them Turbo Energizes, and of course, Kling Clang builds that I mentioned earlier on. Kling Clang just doesn't see a lot of play anymore, unfortunately. Well, Lee, if you had to rank Metal or put it in a tier, where do you think Metal's standing?
I wouldn't call it like mid. I think it's a little bit better. Certainly a lot better this past year, with stuff like Scarlet and Violet coming out. I'd put it high B's. I put it like right below Dragon, probably like real high B, maybe sneak into like A minus.
Okay. Again, I'm probably a little bit different from you on there. I think metal is good. Let's start there. But I'd probably put it like maybe B. Like if I'm thinking colorless and psychic are at the top, and then you got kind of like water and some other decks and maybe A tier. I think metal's probably around B. It still can compete with some of those top decks. I actually think that colorless might actually have one of the tougher times with metal just because of the way that metal can kind of tank hits and also accelerate energies in the same way.
Chain the zombie Zazamena too.
Yeah, yeah, that zombie Zamazenta is going to be pretty bonkers in that deck too. I think the issue is just hex. Like the colorless decks have a little step up because if you hex the metal deck, then they're not going to be able to attach basically any energy. You know, Batang, Bronzong are basically the keys to chaining attackers in those decks. And then if they can't refill their hands with Reverum at times, it can be tough. Yeah, so for me, Metal's a B tier, but still pretty good. Again, I think Metal and Dragon are both like solid decks that I think people should pick up and play. Like at some point, if you're getting into GLC and you're learning the format, like you're going to pick up these decks, and I think that they're going to be good. And I think that people are going to be surprised, especially with recent printings coming up, like how good Dragon is going to be. I think Dragon is going to go be a pretty good deck here in a bit.
for sure. I think both of these decks, both these types, have several archetypes to look into, and that will be good, that are good, and are good like I said, good investments for like right now probably, and even if you're newer, they're definitely both cool types. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do that's kind of exclusive. They kind of have their own things going on.
And that's probably a good way to put it. They're both very unique in what they're going to do. Like they might have elements from what other types can do as well, but like the metal energy synergies that metal has is pretty sweet. Like Bronzong attaches from the discard. Well, then you have to discard one from hand to be able to draw with Rever Room. So you're filling your graveyard or your discard pile for your Bronzong by using your Rever Room. It's just pretty sweet, kind of how like maybe these types have been planned out to function in the roles that they do. You know, DDE is obviously works really well with a lot of the dragon because they have two energy cost attacks, but the energy costs are just all over the place. So obviously DDE was thought out to kind of mitigate that and make a dragon somewhat playable. Um, I'm wondering if we're gonna get, and just is thinking about this, there's the Koraidon that you were playing in your turbo list. I wonder, are we getting another ancient dragon Pokemon for Sadas to be a viable option?
But just one more, that's all it takes.
That's true.
That would be cool. I'm not sure what it would be, but there's definitely a couple of cool options in the Scarlet and Violet games. There's a lot of dragonish paradox. Even something like I don't want to say Iron Jugulis. I guess it is normal and dark or whatever, flying in dark. But Roaring Moon could get one. Who knows? Who knows?
Be cool to see. I'm still thinking about like Baxcalibur. Are we ever going to get a dragon Baxcalibur printing? Like the water ones, the ice printing, which is in water, is super sweet and playable in GLC. Are we ever going to get a dragon Baxcalibur? I
That
guess.
would be pretty cool.
Well, all right. That's just the end. I got one shout out here. Hey, I got a Discord now. So if you want to keep up with all things related to all about that beige and the Let Loose podcast, check it out. Code's on the screen. I'll probably put it in the description too. But that's all we got. Lee, thanks for joining me today, dude, to talk shop about Dragon and Metal. Been a pleasure to have you on.
I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you guys again for tuning in to the Let Loose podcast. We'll be back next week where we talk Twilight Masquerade previews and cards that we'll see play in the Gym Leader Challenge format. Have a good one. Good night.